Well, welcome back, everyone. We're thrilled to have you. Just doing a quick audio visual check as always. Got a thumbs up? Fantastic. Welcome back. It's great to see you. We're really excited to dive into verbal reasoning, formal logic. As a brief reminder just about who we are, I am Jonathan Herzog, the head of content here for GREMax at TestMax. By way of background, completed my law degree at Harvard, went to business school at NYU Stern, undergrad at Harvard College, have been teaching classes and tutoring and working on GRE curricula for well over 5 years at this point. And one of the important guiding philosophies here at TestMax and at GREMax is we only hire folks who were not naturals. So we had to struggle through the tests ourselves and had to reverse engineer it and break it down to first principles. So we'll see many of those in action today. And just wanted to highlight that actually for myself, first time I took the GRE was actually back in 2014. And I took it again just a few months ago. And the skills and frameworks and the tools that we'll really hone in today and through our work together at GREMax will make it so that you can predictably and reliably come into test day and punch and get that 170 if you want it. And I found that true for myself, and we're going to help unlock that for you today. So thrilled to be joined by my colleague, Daniella.
Hi, everyone. I'm Daniella. I, like Jonathan, I'm really excited to be here and to talk about the GRE today. I did my undergrad at UC Berkeley, and then my master's at Cambridge, and I'm actually using the GRE to apply to law school, and I've recently been accepted to top 14, some of the top 14 law schools in the US. I'm really excited to be here, and as someone who really struggled with the GRE, I really can speak to improvement and and I'm excited about tackling these questions and this lesson with you today. So back to you, Jonathan.
Awesome. Let's do it. So for those of us who've seen The Matrix or know the meme, the Morpheus meme, this one happens to be slightly modified. It says, what if I told you you had to use 10 plus if statements? Now, we'll get into this today in our extension of formal logic. If you're looking for a broader overview of the GRE and applying to the grad school of your dreams, or any other section of the test, feel free to go to the TestMax YouTube channel, and all of our free webinars from weeks past are all up there. But today is going to be pretty mind-blowing. And so please don't hesitate at any turn to ask questions, check in, really just make sure that you're following along. And I'll try to heighten our awareness to where there's a big divergence in our approach in particular, and what the comparator might be. So into the portal we go. Verbal reasoning at GREMax is vocab, formal logic, and reading comprehension. Critically, especially today, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of verbal reasoning, but really importantly and really powerfully, formal logic. Just as a reminder, this is what the sections look like. Basically half vocab, half logical reasoning and reading comp. But as we'll see today, here's how we can peel back the layers, peel back the wrapping paper, and break questions down to their bare bones. But this is what our traditional 1 of 2 scored sections on test day that constitute that big 170 score for our grad school dreams. All right, rules of the road. So we're going to see a number of perhaps unfamiliar diagramming structures today. And they're just symbols. They're just tools in our toolbox that we can use to represent ideas and words on the page. So as we've seen in a number of webinars from the quant section to the verbal section, the entire GRE is a reading test. The entire GRE is a reasoning test. You don't need any subject matter expertise. It's not a math test, it's a reasoning test. So we're just using some symbols that can be helpful as we drill and practice and get in the trenches to unlock some of the formal logic patterns that appear countless times in the test. So first, if A, then B. So this can present itself in many ways. All A's are B's. The only A's are B's. If A presents itself, A is sufficient. So we call this the sufficient condition. It is enough to guarantee to bring about the outcome or the event B, which we call the necessary condition. So we can think of a number of different examples, but let's just say, if I present to you a gala apple, going back to our simple example from weeks past, just to ground ourselves again, if I present to you a gala apple, then I know it is red. All right, so this can, again, present itself in many ways. All gala apples are red, and so on and so forth. One of the many valid inferences on the basis of an if-then statement is when you reverse and negate the statements. So in official formal logic terms, we call that the contrapositive. But for our terms, all we have to do is flip and negate. So all gala apples are red. Okay, showing you, giving you a gala apple is enough to tell you that what I've given you is red. However, if the gift I've given you is not red, right? So we've flipped the terms and negated, then you can tell me with surety that it is not a gala apple. How do you know? Well, because all gala apples are red. If it were a gala apple, it would be red. But I told you the gift I gave you, the thing I have, is not red. So it cannot be a gala apple. So this is our very basic foundational structure. We have all A's are B's, 100% of A's are B's. We can present this in lots of different ways. We can use Venn diagrams that we'll introduce in just a moment. So let's say this is the world of all things that are red. We have traffic lights, we have Corvettes, we have pens and books, blood, all sorts of things in the world are red. Some of those things are gala apples. And we'll see this in just a moment. However, all of the gala apples are red. So you can see the world of gala apples is inside the world of all things that are red. All right, so we'll start off there, and we're just highlighting a couple of the key tenets of formal logic. But again, if this sounds or seems confusing or unfamiliar, this is exactly what we work on together in drilling and going through deep practice in that skill-based bottom-up training. So we're just heightening our awareness to some of the tools at our disposal. Rules of the road: if A, then B. If not B, then not A. Okay. We alluded to this just a moment ago when we said all gala apples are red, but not all things that are red are gala apples. For instance, traffic lights, Corvettes. Okay, so we have this one-way freeway, this one-way highway. It goes from all to most to some. If I tell you, and you know, for instance, all Teslas are automotive vehicles. So we have the world of automotive vehicles, and we have the world of Teslas. All Teslas are automotive vehicles. One direct valid inference from that statement is that most Teslas, remember we defined the quantifiers in an earlier webinar, at more than 50%, more than half of all Teslas are automotive vehicles. Well, of course, because 100% of Teslas are automotive vehicles. And if we know that most Teslas are automotive vehicles, we can also validly and directly infer that some or at least one Tesla is an automotive vehicle. Okay, so again, we can present this in a multitude of ways, whatever is easiest, simplest, most intuitive for ourselves: Venn diagrams, numbers, formal logic structures, drawing pictures, picking easy examples. Let's use these blocks. Okay, so I have 5 blocks, and if our pen agrees with us, we will see that I have 5 green blocks. So all of my blocks are green. 5 out of 5. Okay. Can I directly infer that most of the blocks are green? Well, what would have to be the case? If we assume each block is indivisible, like a human, say, we have 5 whole entities, then 5 over 2 would be 2.5, but you'd have to have at least 3 of the 5, these whole indivisible blocks, being green. Well, all the blocks are green, so we can definitely say most or more than 3 of the 5 are green. In addition, we can also certainly say that at least 1 of the 5 blocks are green because all 5 blocks are green. But recall, critically, this is a 1-lane highway, so don't go against traffic. We can go all to most to some, but you can't necessarily go back, right? So think back, or we can go back to the block example for just a moment. Okay, so we have our blocks. This time, 2 of the blocks are blue, and 3 of the blocks are red. And we have 5 blocks total. Okay, so what can we validly conclude on the basis of this information? We have 5 total blocks. We know 2 of them are blue. So it is valid to conclude that some of the blocks are blue because at least 1, right? This is our threshold for some. Yep, we got some. Can we conclude most? Well, in this case, most of these indivisible blocks would have to be at least 3, right? Well, we don't have that because we have 3 red of the 5. Can we conclude all that 5 out of the 5 are blue? No, because we only have 2. So whether you prefer using the formal logic diagrams, whether you prefer using the Venn diagrams, whether you prefer using real numbers, or picking examples, whatever is simplest and most intuitive works for you. Again, we're just covering some of the basics here so you can whet your appetite, get a taste for what these tools will look like, and then we'll see real practice questions today where these approaches can unlock tremendous 10x the value than you might have otherwise. Okay, and again, as always, feel free to drop in questions, clarifying otherwise, because it does ramp up. So we have a 2-way street known as sum. It's a pretty powerful street. Again, sum means at least 1, right? At least 1 of the blocks is blue. At least some of the things that are red are gala apples. Notice this 2-way street, right? Some A's are B's. One of the valid inferences here is that some B's are A's. 2-way street here. You can go from A to B and back from B to A. So let's look at this example. I like using Venn diagrams. But again, you can pick numbers, draw an image, whatever works best for you. We have the world of GRE takers, say like the 1.6 million people every year or so. And we have the world of iPhone users, say the 113 plus million people who have iPhones, who use iPhones. Okay, some people who take the GRE are iPhone users, right? We can validly infer from that statement, from that premise in the context of a passage, say that some iPhone users take the GRE. Why? Because if we look at the intersection of this Venn diagram, hey, there's me. Jonathan is in here. I'm a GRE taker and I'm an iPhone user. So I prove that at least one person and maybe we can include Daniella or any of the other folks here as well, are GRE takers and also iPhone users. Some A's are B's, a valid inference, some B's are A's. And you can literally visually depict that intersection if you use Venn diagrams. Very, very powerful tool, the two-way street of sum. By contrast, we have the one-way street that is most. Recall, most means more than 50%. We have strict definitions of quantifiers in formal logic on the GRE. So notice now we have a one-way street. We don't have a two-way street. If you're going from A to B with a most statement, you can only go that way. You can't go back. You can't go against traffic. All right, so let's look at the example. We have Americans, 330 million plus, say. We have global internet users, say 5 billion plus people. Okay, most Americans, in fact, like 93% of Americans have access to broadband and are part of the world of global internet users. However, there's like 5 billion people in the world who use the internet. So most Americans are internet users. Can I validly infer, validly conclude that most global internet users are Americans? No, definitely not. We can look at the numbers. We can look at the visual, look at the intersection of these two Venn diagrams, and whoa, look at this entire universe of people who are internet users but aren't Americans. Or we can also see from our one-way street of most that if most A's are B's, the valid inference that we can make from the statement is that some B's are A's. Now, how could we reverse engineer this inference if, say, we forgot it? Because one of the principles here in GREMax is we don't just memorize things for the sake of them. We understand them, we apply them, and we can even rederive them. Right? That's what I meant before when we said predictably and reliably coming into test day and knowing that whatever you get, whatever wrapping paper, you can break it down, boil it down, and beeline to the right answer. We said before, hey, we have that highway, right? That highway that goes, if I know all, then I know most. If I know most, then I know some. Whoa, okay, so I know most here. I'm given most Americans are internet users. Then I know as a valid inference, as a direct inference, that some Americans are internet users because most, more than 50% of them are. And I know some is a two-way street. Some A's are B's, some B's are A's. So even if we just rederive it, we know that some is a two-way street, some Americans are internet users, some internet users are Americans. Or we can look at the Venn diagram, or we can look at the numbers, or we can reapply the rule that most is a one-way street. Most A's are B's, therefore some B's are A's. It is not necessarily the case that most B's are A's. All right. We're going to combine some things now. So I'll try to slow down and take everything piece by piece here. But again, don't hesitate to chime in. I'm monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So if anything comes up, let us know. So there's a lot here. Try to pack it all into one screen, piece by piece. Some plus all. Okay, we're given two premises, two statements. Some x's are y's, statement one, and all y's are z's. Okay, I'm just going to translate those words, which might have lots of different wrapping paper, but fundamentally, it's the same formal logic pattern. Some x's are y's, and all y's are z's. So we have our two-way street, that is some x's are y's. Okay, already, I translate that to know, well, some y's are x's, right? Some a's are b's, some b's are a's. And I can now link two statements. Our original rules of the road statement, which is all y's are z's. Oh, if y, then z. If a gala apple, then red. One is sufficient. It is enough to guarantee the other. So I've now linked two different statements. The two-way street, some x's are y's, and our highway, all y's are z's, or if y, then z. So notice this linkage term, right? The term that is in common is a y. So if we just use our driving analogy for a moment, some is a two-way street. You can bounce back and forth all you want from x to y. Some x's are y's, some y's are x's. Okay, so we're driving along the road, driving along a two-way street. There's traffic coming both ways. We've arrived at y. Oh, whoa, we have a freeway we can hop onto. The freeway takes you directly to z. But what road did we take to get there? We took the two-way street, some. So we're going to dive into an example to make this more concrete. But just using the driving analogy for just a moment, we see that a valid inference is that some x's are z's. Just by linking and chaining these two statements. Some x's are y's and all y's are z's. Okay, let's look at the same thing in a totally different way to see what clicks. So we have the example up here. All smartphone applications, right? This is the world, all applications on your smartphone. Okay, some x's are y's. Some applications for your smartphone are social media applications. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, you name it, right? Because there are applications that are not those, right? Like, say, GREMax. That's an app. That's not a social media app. Okay. Now, let's say I were to tell you one of the premises is that all y's are z's. All social media apps are addictive. Now, here's the world. Let's color code these actually to make it super clear. So red, let's see if my outline works. Red is the world of things that are addictive. Alcohol, tobacco, cigarettes, drugs, right? And social media apps happen to be part of that. Okay. Blue is going to be the world of social media apps. So let's highlight this. So this is Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, etc. All right. Green is going to be the world of all smartphone applications. Things other than, but also including, things that are social media apps. Notice how I've satisfied the conditions, the constraints, the premises I'm given. Some apps are social media. Now, there could be social media things that are websites, right? Or aren't apps. So there are social media platforms that aren't just apps for your smartphone. Okay. Some apps are social media apps, and all social media apps are addictive. Therefore, note this intersecting space right here. Some apps are addictive. We can add numbers to this as well to prove it, to quantify it. But I think the visual can be helpful here, right? And also just intuitively, if some apps are social media and all social media is addictive, then some of the apps are addictive because those are the ones that are the social media apps that are addictive. Any questions about the linkage of the sum statements, the two-way street, and that one-lane freeway express in the all statement? We can link them together to say, some x's are y's, all y's are z's, therefore, some x's are z's. However, what if we're given the premises, some x's are y's, and all z's are y's? Okay, let's start with the driving. So we have our two-way street, some x's are y's, you can bounce back and forth. Okay, some x's are y's, some y's are x's, la-di-da, you can go back and forth all day if you want. Okay, so let's say you hop in the two-way street, you see traffic's coming both ways, you get there, you get there. Congratulations, you made it to Y. Whoa, there's a freeway coming your way. There's traffic coming at you. It's a one-lane highway, you're stuck. You've hit a barrier, a barricade. No more, no mas. No valid inference. Nothing is assured. So note the direction of traffic is super important. Just like we said, from all to most to some, you can't necessarily go from some to most to all. So too, when we're linking a sum statement and an all statement, some x's are y's, all z's are y's. We gotta note the direction of traffic. You can't go against traffic on a one-way street, a one-way highway. All right, let's look at the Venn diagram here. So we're gonna color code this as well. Okay. Some x's are y's. So let's do these apples. We looked at this example before. Some apples are red, right? I can think of like, there's Gala apples, there's Granny Smith apples, Honeycrisp. They're inventing new apples every day. Okay, but this is the world of all things that are red, right? There's things like traffic lights, Corvettes, etc. Lots of things that are red. Okay, within the world of things that are red, also there's red lights, right? Because red lights are definitely red. So notice how we've satisfied the conditions. Some x's are y's, some apples are red, and all z's are y's. All red lights are also red. Awesome. So I've depicted that in the Venn diagram. Red lights is subsumed within the world of things that are red, and the world of things that are red intersects with the world of apples. But notice there is no direct linkage relationship between the yellow circle and the green, between red lights and apples. I can't necessarily infer that some apples are red lights or some red lights are apples. That's the power of the all highway, the all freeway, which is only in one direction. Any questions about any of this? Some and all linkage. All right, here we go. Most and all linkage. And again, just always as a preface, always as a caveat. If all of this seems totally new, totally confusing, unfamiliar, do not worry. Our job is to be here in service and supporting you, and we're giving you a sense of what working with us, getting in the weeds of these drills, of this bottom-up skill-based foundational training and formal logic can look like. And then we'll see in just a few moments actual verbal reasoning GRE questions where we use these tools to unlock a direct beeline to the answer. Most plus all. All right, we just did sum plus all. What did we say if we said some x's are y's, all y's are z's, some x's are z's? Cool. Very similar principle. Here are my premises. Most x's are y's, okay? And all y's are z's. All right, recall. Most is a one-way street. So if I say most x's are y's, I can diagram it like so. All right, wait, what's a translation? One inference I can make? Do I necessarily know that most y's are x's? No, but I can say that some y's are x's, right? Because most is the one-way street, and because if I know most x's are y's, I know some x's are y's, and some is a two-way street. Some y's are x's. Just always good to reiterate what are the inferences that we can already make. But for our purposes here, we're chaining, we're linking two statements. Most x's are y's, and all y's are z's. Okay, awesome. So we hop on the little road on the street in our neighborhood. We're hopping on the most road, driving along, get to Y. Whoa, awesome. Free pass on the freeway all the way to Z. But remember, we got there taking the most road, and we can validly infer that most x's are z's. That highway took us all the way to Z. Okay, let's look at an example. We'll try to color code it as well. And we even have some numbers this time. Okay, I own a pet store, let's say. So this is the world of pets that I sell or that I have in my pet store or an adoption center, what have you. And let's say there's 10. Awesome. Well, if you have ever been to a pet store, maybe there's parakeets, there's birds, there's cats, there's dogs, there's fish, there's geckos, there's lots of different pets. Okay, but in my pet store, what I'm telling you is that most of my pets are Labradors. In fact, we'll just pick easy numbers. We'll say that 8 of them are Labradors, right? 8 of the pets in my pet stores are Labradors, 2 are not Labradors. Maybe they're geckos, who knows? Okay. Now, one thing I know about Labradors is that all Labradors are dogs. So green is the world of dogs. Let's say there's only 100 dogs in our township. All right. So we said most X's are Y's. Most of the pets I have in my pet stores are Labradors. And all Labradors are dogs. So recall, I have 10 pets in my pet store. 8 of those are Labradors. All 8 of the Labradors are dogs. So I can definitely conclude that most of the pets in my pet store are dogs. That intersection being here in yellow. Most X's are Y's, all Y's are Z's, therefore most X's are Z's. Numbers, Venn diagrams, visual, formal logic diagram, many approaches. However, again, the direction of traffic really matters. Don't drive against traffic on a one-lane highway. Most X's are Y's, and all Z's are Y's. So note the direction. Most X's are Y's. Okay, cool. We have our one-way street, most street. We're driving, we get to Y. Whoa, there's traffic coming our way. There's a whole slew of cars coming at us. Whoa, we've hit a barricade. Stop. No valid inference. You're done. You can't just hop on the freeway because traffic is coming your way. No valid inference here. Let's look at a concrete example, and then we'll dive into questions in just 1 minute. So let's say I have a hardware goods store, or Annalise has a hardware goods store, and they sell 10 goods. So this is the world of hardware goods. I'll try to outline these as clearly as possible. Okay, now, most of the goods that Annalise sells are boxes, right? So let's say the same numbers as before, like 8 of the things that Annalise sells at her hardware goods store are boxes. Now note, this is the world of boxes. There's like 100 boxes in my township. Okay. All Z's are Y's. So, let's pick a different color, blue. So every day there's lots of packages being delivered at my neighbor's doorsteps, and these are Amazon boxes. Let's say there's 20 of them. So all Amazon boxes are boxes. And most of the things I sell in my store or Annalise sells in her hardware store are boxes. Notice there's no linkage here. There's no necessary guaranteed inference that the boxes that Annalise sells are Amazon boxes. Why? Because the world of boxes, right? The world of Y's subsumes or contains the world of Amazon boxes. And there is no intersection here guaranteed between the boxes that Annalise sells and the boxes that Amazon sells or delivers its packages in. Making sure we adhere to the rules of the road. If traffic is coming onto us, we stop. If we can hop on the highway, then we have a valid inference, and that valid inference can be quite powerful. All right, again, feel free, please do chime in with any questions, thoughts, reflections on any of this. And barring that, we'll move on to some real GRE, verbal reasoning questions. And I'll hand it off back to Daniella. for a little bit of a respite from all this.
Yeah, we're just going to take, thanks, Jonathan. We're just going to take a little bit of a detour here through some verbal reasoning questions. These questions don't necessarily have to use the formal logic that we just talked about, but we're going to get to that in a few moments. Now we're going to go through some of these fill in the blank vocabulary-based questions that you'll see on the GRE. The one thing here that we have is we are going to read the question, but before we even get there, we're going to take a look at the question and its structure. And here we can see that there's a colon. And what does a colon indicate? A colon indicates that the definition of the word that you're placing comes right before it. So let's take a closer look. So here we've identified the colon. So we're trying to find a word that suits the definition that comes right after the colon. So let's read the question together. In the 1950s, the country's inhabitants were blank. Most of them knew very little about foreign countries. So we're trying to look for a word here that means know very little about foreign countries. So partisan means to have like a prejudice or be part of or in support of a cause. Erudite is a person that has a lot of knowledge about something. Insular, oh, that's something that means limited or only knowing about itself. That seems like it could work. Cosmopolitan means international, of many different places. So that's not insular, or sorry, that's not to know very little about foreign countries. And imperturbable, that means like unable to be disturbed, incapable of becoming upset. So I think that we found our answer here, which is C, insular.
Fantastic. And one of the awesome things that Daniella is illustrating to us as we go through a couple of these vocab questions is essentially that vocab is vocab is vocab. But as we'll see in a moment, what happens when formal logic comes into the picture.
So moving on to the next question. Here, as you can see, we don't see a colon. So there's nothing in terms of the structure here. But we do see a comma. So just let's keep that a little bit in the back of our minds. Since she believes him to be both candid and trustworthy, candid meaning honest or open, she refused to consider that the possibility that his statement had been blank. So we're looking for something that doesn't mean candid, or it doesn't mean trustworthy. So irrelevant means not relevant. Facetious means joking or inappropriate in an inappropriate way. Mistaken is to make a mistake. Critical here actually has two definitions, which you'll learn as you study for the GRE, which means like important to something or to like criticize. And insincere means not sincere, which could be a synonym for something that's not trustworthy or someone who's not candid. So that is the correct answer. Here, again, we can see what Jonathan was saying before about how the knowledge of these vocabulary words, plain and simple, is what you need to know. And on the GREMax app, you'll see those vocabulary words all laid out for you. Okay, this one. Now let's look at the question again. Let's look at the structure. Here we can recognize, although it looks scary at first, that there's two blanks. Blank number 1 and blank number 2. And although it looks a little bit more complicated, it's really not. We're going to approach it the same exact way, trying to think in the test maker's mind and understand what this question is saying. So the blank, and we also see a colon here. So we should look out and see if the colon is being used to define a term that comes after it. So the blank nature of classical tragedy in Athens belies, which means to like mislead or deceive, the modern image of tragedy. In the modern view, tragedy is austere. So what does austere mean? We can think of the word austerity, which means to lessen or make less or stop and strip down, like austerity policy in economics to remove money or take money out of the economy. It's representations of ideological and emotional conflict so superbly compressed that there's nothing blank for time to erode. So let's think about this again. So we're looking for something that we're contrasting here, classical versus modern. So modern, in the modern view, strategy is austere and stripped down. Its representations of ideological and emotional conflict so superbly compressed that there's nothing blank for time to erode. So I'm not quite sure about the second blank, but we know that the first blank is a descriptor of classical tragedy, which is the opposite of something that's austere and stripped down. So we can look at the answer choices. Unadorned means not adorned, particularly really plain. Adorned is like something enhancement, something makes something look nicer. Harmonious means to be like in harmony and to be pleasant. And multifaceted actually means to have many facets, to have multiple angles, to have many different dimensions to it. So C would be correct because that would be the opposite of to be austere and stripped down. And also for blank number 2, it's saying it's representations of ideological and emotional conflict so superbly compressed that there's nothing blank for time to erode. So for this one, we're looking also for something that there's nothing, the modern view is that there's nothing, it's not complicated, but in classical, it would be because it's different than the modern. So an alienable, what does inalienable mean? It means like think about an inalienable right. So unable to be left behind or unable to be taken away. Exigent means something that's demanding or that doesn't really fit here. But extraneous could fit here because it's not, in contrast to modern tragedy, which is austere and stripped down, classical tragedy is not that. So those would be our answers. So here we have multifaceted and extreme. So I'll pass it with that. I'll pass it back to you, Jonathan. And again, just to reiterate the importance of looking at the GRE app in terms of learning vocabulary, and as it will serve you well throughout many sections of the GRE.
All right, fantastic. So we just took a little detour to remind ourselves, again, just an important contrast of the 3 big buckets, components that we talked about earlier of vocab, formal logic, and reading comprehension. We're going to pivot again to formal logic and reading comprehension in our logical reasoning questions. But I want to suggest to you this. Every single other GRE preparatory tool, and we can tell you this from our experience personally and struggling with it ourselves, will tell you to do 2 things. Study vocab to answer the types of questions Daniella just showed us, and they'll call it fancy things. They'll call it sentence equivalence, and they'll call it comparison, and all sorts of fancy terms for, hey, fill in the blank with a word. How do you study those words? Flashcards, or reading, or seeing them. And the only other component of their verbal reasoning part of their course, again, just telling you from firsthand experience, will be, hey, read critically, think while you read. That is essentially, I've boiled down to you what every single GRE verbal reasoning course is. Read critically, think carefully while you read. Okay, we're going to look at this short passage together and see what the difference in approaches might yield. So let's read it together. For the past 2 years at Fast Corp, there has been a policy to advertise any job opening to current employees and to give no job to an applicant from outside the company if a Fast Corp employee applies who is qualified for the job. Again, we're trying approach number 1, which is just read critically, think while you read. Demonstrative. This policy has been strictly followed, yet even though numerous employees of Fast Corp have been qualified for any given entry-level position, some entry-level jobs have been filled with people from outside the company. Awesome. I read it. Jobs, Fast Corp, employees, qualified, outside. Okay, cool. Let's move on to the question. Cool. Question says, select and indicate the best answer from among the 5 answer choices. If the information provided is true, which of the following must, on the basis of it, also be true about FastCorp during the past 2 years? Okay, so what also has to be true? Let's look at A, because I already read the passage, right? There have been some open jobs for which no qualified FastCorp employee applied. Wait, qualified employee. Oh, wait. I'm going to go back to the passage. All right, let's reread the part about qualified employees. For the past 2 years at FastCorp, there's been a policy to advertise any job opening to current employees and to give no job to an applicant from outside the company if a FastCorp, wait, what was answer choice A again? Wait, hold on, go back to answer choice A. There have been some open jobs for which no qualified FastCorp employee applied. I don't know, that doesn't feel right. Let's leave it there. Some entry-level job openings have not been advertised to FastCorp employees. I don't know, that's some not advertised. Let's just see what other options we have. Like one will stand out to us. The total number of employees has increased. FastCorp has hired some people for jobs for which they were not qualified. Oh, that just feels right, because like not qualified and some people and jobs. Okay, cool. And then E was like all the job openings have been for entry-level jobs. Now that's like too extreme. This is what approach number 1 would take us. It would involve jumping back and forth, carelessly reading the passage, running into the question stem, not even identifying whether it is a set of facts or an argument, not even identifying the premises or the conclusion, not even breaking it down to the formal logic statements, not even identifying the classification of the type of question stem to identify the type of correct and incorrect answer choices. If all of this sounds unfamiliar, see our first webinar on verbal reasoning. And then jumping between the answers and the passage, and the answers and the passage, to the point where 2 things are likely. You'll beeline to the trap answer, and you'll waste maybe 4 minutes on the question. So you'll get it wrong, or you'll waste a lot of time, and then get the low-hanging fruit that comes on later in the section wrong or miss it entirely. So hopefully that was demonstrative. Again, personal experience. I remember tackling the test the first time myself as well, and having taken the LSAT and the GMAT as well, which have many similarities. And our intuitive, untrained mind's approach of, hey, let's rush, gets the questions done, gets the answers, is exactly the trap the test maker has designed. So let's restart. Approach number 2. We have our diagrams written there. So the lead is not buried. Approach number 2. For the past 2 years at FastCorp, there has been a policy to advertise any job opening to current employees and to give no job to an applicant from outside the company if a FastCorp employee applies who is qualified for the job. This is a lot. There is a mouthful and a lot baked in to this single sentence. This is a 2-sentence passage, but we're going to spend 80 to 90% of our time just breaking it down, just translating it, so that once we get to the question stem and answers, it takes us 15 seconds and we ignore all the incorrect choices. So let's first translate the words into other words and then those words into diagrams. Okay, so for the past 2 years, okay, at FastCorp, there's been a policy to advertise any job opening, so all job openings. So if a job opening is advertised, then it is being advertised to current employees. Again, all of this we do countless, literally hundreds of drills to identify these key words, these key signifiers, to the point that once you've gone through hundreds of drills, you'll just immediately translate. And actually there's been neuropsychological research, which you can go through on PubMed or any public database, on formal logic training literally rewires the neural networks in your mind. So, and I saw this firsthand in my own experience. I used to just see words on a page. I used to just see advertise any job opening to current employees and then kind of read on as if there was nothing happening. If they're just words, right? What else could there be? But now when I read a passage, I literally see and process it differently in my mind because I spent years training in the nitty-gritty of formal logic. So when I see any or all or if, I literally see a conditional, an if-then statement, a sufficient and necessary condition. Okay. To advertise any job opening to current employees, and we're always looking for conjunction or disjunction, ands or ors, because that affects so many of our formal logic statements. To give no job to an applicant from outside the company. Now, this is pattern recognition formulaic. We break this down to no A's are B's, which means if A, then not B. So we'll literally go through this together and you'll see hundreds of cases where you're like, okay, what does this mean? Like we looked at X's and Y's and Z's before, like why is that relevant? Why are we doing this? No A's are B's, like if you have an A, then it's not a B. And then just literally intuitively, you're like, okay, cool. And I can flip and negate. So if I have a B, then it's not an A. Awesome. No A's or B's. If A, then not B. If B, then not A. But whoa, whoa, whoa. All you had on the page was no job to give no job to an applicant from outside the company. But we're translating this already. So we're seeing like 4 different conditionals set up in a single sentence up front. Okay. Let's look at that. To give no job to an applicant from outside the company if all, any, sufficient, if a fast corporate employee applies who is qualified for the job. So again, don't stress, don't freak out if any of this is unfamiliar or seems confusing. And just in the interest of time for today's webinar, I just wrote it out before today's session. But we can diagram it as such. If someone is given a job, then they must be a qualified employee who has applied for the job. You can use whatever shorthand is most intuitive, most simple for you. But when we break down the multiple conditionals just in the first sentence alone, we basically just get, relevant for our purposes, that, hey, if someone has a job, then I know that person is a qualified employee who has applied for that job. I'm just calling it QEA. Okay, so this is what my brain is seeing when I read the first sentence after I've broken down the number of conditionals. Sentence number 2. Notice I have not read the question stem, nor have I looked at the answers. And like, I don't know, 40 seconds has gone by, let's say on test day. This policy has been strictly followed, yet we're always looking for contrast signifiers. Even though numerous, again, we're going to look at many qualifiers and many quantifiers, numerous, many, some, at least one, more than a couple. Yet even though numerous employees of FastCorp have been qualified for any, all, any particular, given entry-level position, okay, we were talking about jobs before. Entry-level position is not the same as a job, but if we think of the world of jobs, remember our big Venn diagram and our world of entry-level positions are a type of job, but notice how they're changing it on us. Unwarranted inferences abound. For any given entry-level position, some, at least one, entry-level jobs have been filled with people from outside the company. Notice the terminology being changed. But again, if we bake it down, if we boil it down to if A then B, if A then not B, if you're from outside the company, then you're not from inside the company, right? Because you're only either inside or outside. Okay. So again, don't stress, don't fret if any of this is confusing or unfamiliar. But just in the interest of time, we've boiled it down already. What we see, and it can infer from the second sentence in our set of facts, is hey, some qualified employees don't have jobs or aren't going to get jobs, some jobs in the company, right? Because entry-level positions are a type of job. And we're told that some employees in the company who are qualified are not given these jobs because they're being filled with people from outside. So notice, we had our sum chain linked with the all chain from before. What is the hidden unstated premise, the assumption in the argument? They want us to be puzzled by this seeming paradox because they told us in sentence 1, right? There's a policy whereby, hey, if you got a job, right, that was advertised to all current employees, it was given to a qualified employee in the company who has applied. However, seeming paradox presented in sentence number 2, there exists some qualified employees who were not given these jobs because they were given to people from outside the company. How is that possible? Again, and there's many phases in our formal logic training, but we'll literally then automatically convert an if-then statement to its contrapositive, to its reverse and negation. So if a job, then a qualified employee is applied, the logical equivalent being, if you're not a qualified employee who's applied, then you don't got a job. AKA, if you're an employee from outside, remember we said no job is given to you. Okay. The unstated assumption, the unstated premise in this entire argument is that some qualified employees did not apply to these jobs. That's the missing link. So very often we'll see 2 conditionals or 2 formal logic statements like we have here. If you got a job, then you're a qualified employee who's applied. But if you're a qualified employee, some of you don't got a job because they were given to those outside the company. And so what we're going to do, and remember on test day, it's like 60 seconds have passed or like 75 seconds have passed. You haven't even read the question stem or the answers. We're saying, what's the missing link? What's the gap here in the logic? I see the job is connecting these 2 statements, but the test maker wants us to assume that if you're a qualified employee, you're a qualified employee who has applied to the job. That's not necessarily the case. Again, you can pick numbers, you can think of the Venn diagrams, or you can just intuit it, which is that you're qualified for many jobs, but have you applied to all of them? Qualified employee is not the same as qualified employee who has applied to the job. With this, we're literally nearly guaranteed this point, this very, very significant point that could have otherwise done 2 of the possible things. A, we could have just beelined directly to the trap answer because we failed to analyze or break down the logical gaps, the premises, the assumption of the argument, identifying the 2-way street of sum, identifying the one-way highway of if you got a job, then you're a qualified employee who's applied to it, and identifying the gap that not all qualified employees have also applied to the company or applied to these jobs. Not only will you get the question wrong, you'll waste, as I know, as I did initially, 3 to 4 to 5 minutes sometimes because it feels like something's resting on the line. And then you'll miss the low-hanging fruit vocab questions that Daniella just walked us through, which are strategically placed at question number 17, 18, and 19. And you're on question 2 of the test. The GRE punishes ego. And we talked about this briefly in our GRE strategy, and we'll get to the answers and the final questions as we're coming up on time. But recall, on the difficulty curve throughout the section, this might be a pretty challenging logical reasoning question that requires formal logic, or that could really benefit from formal logic. And you're on question 3 of a section of 20. And maybe that simple fill in the blank question was right here, question 16. But guess what? You didn't get to it. The GRE punishes you over and over and over again for not using formal logic. and falling into the traps. So now we come to the question stem with our breakdown of the argument and our identification of the missing gap, the missing premise, and the assumption. And now we're classifying what is this question stem. If the information provided is true, which of the following must, on the basis of it, also be true about FastCorp during the past 2 years? So we'll go through hundreds of these examples, but we know this is a must be true question, where there's going to be 4 strictly incorrect answer choices and 1 strictly correct answer choice. We identified those in our previous verbal reasoning session. The 1 correct answer choice must be true. That means the logical opposite of what must be true is what is not necessarily true, which is what could be false. Let's go to answer choice A. There have been some open jobs for which no qualified employee applied. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. That was literally the assumption we mapped out just a second ago. So no, like a minute 20 has passed on test day, but I would literally go to A, beeline to A. If you wanted to, you could flag the question and move on, or you could quickly spend 5 to 10 seconds looking at the wrong answer choices, and we can even identify as we do together why each one is predictably wrong. But in this case, they could all possibly be false. They're not necessarily true. But you don't even have to do that if you practice breaking down the arguments, breaking down the premises, identifying the formal logic connections. In this case, we use a 2-way some street and the 1-way all highway, right? This went all the way back to some x's are y's, all y's are z's. And that let us beeline to answer choice A with 10 seconds to spare, and we move right along. So in the interest of time, we have a number of other questions set up here. And you can most certainly, these are all available online, go through them yourself, try to apply the same principles that we walked through today. But what I want to share with you all, again, just in the interest of our time, is 2 quick things. 1, next steps, take a free practice test online, see what your baseline is. 2, download the GREMax app on tablet and mobile. 3, sign up for a free 20-minute consult with a GREMax team member. We're more than happy, as always, to stay on today to talk about you, your GRE goals, your grad school dreams, help you unlock your potential. And we are really thrilled to share the tutoring packages that are available. But again, we're more than happy to stay on, answer any questions you have about any of the substantive content from today, about how it applies to the GRE or your grad school dreams. But I want to share just both from personal experience and knowing the market of what's out there for GRE very well, note the contrast in the approaches. It is hard to overstate what that 10x in value looks like. I see there was a question that came in. Where can we access the videos if you have the app? The webinar videos are on the TestMax YouTube channel. So if you just Google them, they are posted, I think like a couple days usually after the live webinar. But with that, we'll leave it again open to questions, and thank you so much. And hope you got a taste for the value of formal logic in unlocking your GRE dreams. I really want to rewatch the videos. I cannot find the ones from last week. Yes, law school and GRE, a big passion project of ours. I will happy to address that. The ones from last week, I think, is in the process of being uploaded. So bear with us, but it will be there. Law school and GRE, I love this question. Very, very passionate about it. I see the YouTube link was added to the chat. Do you have a specific question about law school and GRE, or do you want to just hear general thoughts about it? Feel free again to even turn on your camera, share your story, or share it in the chat. Scores. What does this mean? Law school and GRE scores. Feel free to, again, share more information about what you want to hear more about. Otherwise, if you're asking about what GRE scores will be sufficient or get you into law school and what those would be, GRE is actually now widely accepted amongst most every top law school and more than 65 law schools nationwide. And if you want to see the scores, they're either reported directly on the law school class profile website or in some of their 509 reportings, which is their mandatory LSAC reporting. Some of the law schools are also now including. So if you just Google, like, let's say Harvard Law School 509 report or GRE scores, they actually have the 25th, 50th, 75th percentile of the past admitted class year. They are treated equally in admission. They're as predictive of the grades and academic outcomes that the tests are designed to predict. And in fact, as we talked about in our first webinar, which is on the YouTube channel, some schools like Harvard, for example, are explicitly recruiting folks from science, technology, engineering, mathematics, arts, non-traditional backgrounds, diverse backgrounds, and the GRE is seen as a more accessible, more broadly available, a test you can take on your laptop 24/7 at home, more technologically friendly. And so the sort of old myth, the old mythos that like lawyers don't do math, essentially, is actually breaking down. And actually law schools are actively recruiting people who have a quantitative bent because of advances in technology and advances in technology in the law. So not sure if that was what you're looking for, but again, happy to answer anything else if you share more details or chime in about what you want to hear. Just reading the question. I don't know if it's visible to all. So I don't know if I want to read, but the individual shared their personal stats. Yeah, well, congratulations on the phenomenal GPA, and more than happy to work together to get you that GRE score to, I assume it's the same person who wants to apply to law school. But again, as we said, I can speak from the LSAT, the GMAT, and the GRE. When I first took the exam, I was at the national median. I was at the 50th percentile when I first took it. But it was the training and the drilling and the work and the day in and day out, without the best resources at the time, that made it possible to get that 170 on the GRE. So there's no limit, there's no ceiling on what you can do, and we're more than happy to work with you to make that happen. Well, again, feel free to chime in. I don't know if you can open up, but happy to share my email as well if that helps. It's just jonathan@testmaxprep.com. And so just my first name, JONATHAN, happy to answer any questions whatsoever. We're here for you. We're here to make this happen. We've really enjoyed these webinars. We'll be on next week again, and we'll be doing some exciting deep dive into reading comprehension and logical flaws. The week after, we'll do back to quant, we'll do geometry. But we're really excited and thankful. Fantastic. Thank you so much.